Do you have the faith of Job? Does any of us have the faith, a strong enough faith, to get us through the road ahead? I ask this in all sincerity because I don't know about my other Christian listeners out there, but I have this sense of foreboding, definitely. And again, the more you look into this stuff, the more insane the world looks today. And by all indications, everything is being propped up to fail right now. And we've had it good, so good for so long that a lot of people are going to get very, very angry when they're confronted with uncomfortable situations, when all those little creature comforts are taken away from them, when all those little toys, when all those little amusements are taken away from them, when their houses, their cars, their food even, their ability to buy food, that's when things usually get pretty ugly. And it just seems like the verse comes to mind, speaking of faith. As in the days of Noah, men and women were eating, drinking, giving in marriage. It was just like things were just going to keep going on forever, right? That was the overall consensus. That was the accepted norm, the societal norm. That, we can just keep partying. And, we got a lot of time. We don't have to be concerned about judgment or a major calamity. Like lambs to the slaughter, right? And that's where I think the adversary, the fallen one, that's where I think he's got us, for the most part, right where he wants us. To raise up a generation that is completely helpless if and when things ever, go south. What are you going to do when you don't have that job security, when you don't have those government handouts? What are you going to do to feed yourself? To have a roof over your head? To not be out on the street freezing in the winter? May your flight not be in the winter, right? And so we're told here in Revelations 11:18 that the nations will be angry, and we're starting to see more and more headlines, just day after day now, of how angry people are starting to get. If you've seen the pre-scripted scenario for the coronavirus pandemic, the tabletop exercise put on by Johns Hopkins, and pretty much included the who's who of the global cabal, entities, individuals, and organizations that have basically captured the governments of the world to do their bidding.
These epidemic events are getting more and more disruptive to health and to economy. And the reason we called it Event 201 is we knew eventually one of these days, one of those events would be the big one. And that big one would really challenge our capacity to respond. And to respond to the big one, we do need to have all hands on deck.
The same event 201 simulation that revolved around the fictional narrative of a coronavirus originating in bats but passing to humans via pigs.
Participants are confronted by a hypothetical scenario that presents to them the challenges of a response. So we will say, here's a hypothetical disease outbreak. This is the way it might be evolving. And these are some of the challenges that you'll see that you'll have to address to address the disruptions that you're seeing to your healthcare system or to your organization.
Even funneling the monies of the taxpayers and injecting it directly into their, in the case of, say, Bill Gates and his Gavi philanthropies, if you want to call them that.
All stakeholders realize pretty quickly just how underprepared we are and just how much is possible when we work together. And that the individual actions of any government or company won't add up to a proper global response. I think if we're honest with ourselves, collectively, the international community has never done enough to respond to global health security challenges. That we knew before COVID that the world was underprepared for biological risk.
I prefer to see it as the externalization of wicked men in high places and their dealings with the devil, but that's just me.
When we walked into the room in New York, if you would have asked, do you think the world is prepared for a pandemic? I think everyone around that table would have said no. But it's when they walked out, I think it's when we really knew that if we are going to get ready, we need to have operationalized and integrated public-private cooperation that we haven't seen before.
According to Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, quote, the exercise illustrated areas where public-private partnerships will be necessary during the response to a severe pandemic in order to diminish large-scale economic and societal consequences. And I just think it's interesting how vital the corporate structure has been throughout all the implementation of these mandates. One of the things that they covered would be was the angry masses that would, for possibly decades to come, the lady said. The trust would be lost between governments and their people because of these quote-unquote necessary steps that these angels in office would have to take in order to keep us all safe, right? Yeah. So, my question is, I think it's a good question. If we identify as Christian, if we use that label to define ourselves, I think it's important for us to evaluate just how close our walk is with God. And I think the story of Job is a good example, because to me it kind of in some way describes the condition of all of us being fairly well off, comfy Americans, and we have a lot of things, and we have a lot of material wealth for the most part, in relation to other countries. In fact, this verse, as I understand it, was kind of always a descriptor of the Church of the End Times, and I think it's pretty adequate, pretty accurate description of the condition of the world by and large today, of the world, the Christians of the world, the quote-unquote Christians of the world today. And the Church of Laodicea is described as, this is God speaking, I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth, because you say, I am rich and increased with goods, and have need of nothing. I know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, and blind, and naked. Isn't that the perfect description of the churches today, in particular the established churches? Even more so, the big-time mega churches, is that they are so wealthy and so established in the world. But overall, they're blind. It says they're increased with goods. That's something we have no shortage of in this country, surplus. And it seems like, you're in need of nothing. And we're completely blind, naked, miserable, wretched, poor, spiritually. And by and large part, ineffectual to do the work of God. And that's a scary condition to be in, really. If you're at all concerned with your eternal fate. But as always is the case, it's God is calling his people. And so at the end of this rebuke, I guess you could say, he says, I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire. That's your character. That thou may be rich, and white raiment, that's the righteousness of Christ. That thou may be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou may see. And it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to him and sup with him, and he with me. To him that overcomes will I grant to sit with me at the throne, at my throne, even as I have also overcame, and am sat down with my Father in his throne. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So that is the true condition of the church, the final church, toward the end of time. And I just think, so in that context of being materially prosperous, and that trial by fire that's to come during this rise of the beast power and the implementation of the mark of false worship, that will be the final test for every true believer in God. I thought the story of Job applied pretty well here. I just kind of came to me today, and I thought I'd make a little show about it real quick. So in Job, the book of Job, and the question is, do you have the faith of Job? And, I ask this of myself. I'm not just pointing a finger. For every finger you point, there's like 10 more that point back at you, the saying goes, something like that. So the book of Job, 1:1, I guess. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed him. That's the King James, and that means like shunned. So shunned evil. So this is how it's described. There's a encounter with Satan, the fallen one, and God, and Satan wants to prove, because God is proud of Job being a faithful servant. And there is this theme all the way back here in the Old Testament of this great controversy between the character of God and the accusations of Satan. And so that's really, in a sense, for all the heavenly hosts, as the story goes, the third of the angels were cast out of heaven. The dragon, takes a third of the stars, the verse goes, with him down to earth. And so there's still controversy in heaven. There's a reason why there's still a judgment yet to come, is because not only we here on earth stand before the judgment throne, but for all the worlds, God himself and his character, in a sense, are on trial, right? Is God, are God's ways just? Are his laws, the laws of his kingdom, just? And that's the accusations that Satan threw at God, and amazingly convinced a third of the angels to join his side. The covering cherubim, whose job was to cover the glory, the Shekinah glory of God, who sat on the throne, the mercy seat. So it says here, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. That's interesting. So you could say, in a sense, Satan controls the airwaves, right? Satan controls the frequencies. Even the 5G? Yeah, maybe. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that fears God and, what's the word? Shuns evil. Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? And the argument is, and of course, Satan being Satan always has a pretty clever argument, right, to cast doubt. It's kind of like the phrase, playing the devil's advocate. He's really good at crafting an argument to turn people away from God and truth. And so he says, basically, there's a reason why he fears, and then that concept of fear can be also respect. It doesn't have to be like, you're not... The wicked fear the Lord, right? Describes in the end, they're crying for the rocks to fall on them because they're so fearful of the day of judgment. And so when it describes, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, it's not so much like you're cowarding in the corner, afraid at any moment and God's going to strike you with a lightning bolt. No, it's more like you respect, you reverence God. And how can you not, really? Just look around you at how amazingly everything is designed, and every breath you can take no credit for. You are designed, your body is designed so meticulously that it runs itself, it operates itself, all the little cells running through your veins. You can't take credit for that. You can't even take credit for your own thought processes, if you think about it. But yet, man is high and mighty as he can be. Richard Dawkins comes to mind, these other, quote-unquote great atheistic thinkers, so boastful as to deny the existence of God when you'd have to put yourself on the throne of the universe to make such a claim, right? You can't see every corner of the universe. You can't claim to have looked under every rug out there and every other galaxy of the universe so that you can be 100% confident that there is no God out there somewhere, out of sight, hidden from your eyes, hidden from your view. And again, if we skip ahead here, God speaking to Job in Job 38:31. Can you bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades? or loose the bands of Orion? Can you bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or can you guide Arcturus with his sons? Know you the ordinances of heaven? Can you set the dominion thereof in the earth? And what God is saying here, as only God can say, is basically, of course, the Pleiades are the seven sisters star cluster, and Orion's belt is it's a nursery for newborn stars. And so you could say in these passages, the sweet influences of the Pleiades or loose the bands of Orion. Well, what are the bands of Orion? Gravity, maybe. Gravitational pull among stars, pressures creating newborn stars. You could say in a sense that this is almost a prediction of the discoveries of science that would follow. And 32 Mazzaroth I did look up. I think it's just another name for constellation. So yeah, can you bring forth the constellations in their season? And Arcturus, and his sons, that's another constellation. So the ordinances of heaven. So basically he's saying, can you, as God does, order the universe? Which is a pretty huge concept if you think about it. If you think about the complexity of the entire universe, all the stars, all the galaxies spinning, all the interactions of all these different gravitational forces, and the mysterious dark matter, right, that the scientists still can't understand, that holds the whole universe together. I've always wondered, could that be God, maybe? The influence of God holding, the planets in their orbits, holding the galaxies in their orbits, holding all the matter, the visible matter in the universe together and organizing it like clockwork. Yeah, just some deep thoughts to think about from these verses. But that's how boastful man is. That's how arrogant we can be. So that was the accusation that Satan. So you're having this conversation. It's kind of a weird scenario, right? And you have Satan going to God and making accusations. Why does Job fear or revere God? Well, there's a reason, right? And it goes on. Yeah, hast not thou made a hedge about him, right? You've protected him, and about his house, and about all that he has on every side. Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. So he's got a lot of stuff. He's got whatever the wealth standard was back then, probably a lot of animal, livestock, storehouses, grain, possessions, and with the knowledge that, God has sustained and protect all that he had. And that's Satan's argument here, should be in our minds at all times, right? Like, we should be thankful for what we do have, because all things are given by God. And we're just temporary stewards here in our short little lifespans. And so Satan says he has all these things that you've protected, kept him nice and cozy. He's had it pretty good, like we have here in this country. But his argument is, so put forth your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse thee to thy face. Satan's saying, take everything away from this man, and he will turn his back on you. His faith will quickly dissolve, and his true character will show. And unfortunately, that is, I think, the condition of many in the church today, many that proclaim to be Christian, is that all it takes, and the devil knows this, take enough things away from them, right? The nations were angry. And what's going to make them angry? All they have to do is just keep taking things away from people, and they're going to get more and more angry. The Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he has is in thy power. So he allows Satan to do his work, to prove Job's character, to prove that Job's faith is true. And he says, so all that he has you can take, basically. Only upon himself put not your hand, so touch not Job himself. The devil cannot force us to be lost. You know, there's always a choice. There's always a free will choice to sin or not to sin, to remain righteous or become wicked, to follow God or to walk away from God and be lost. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord, and yeah, he went to scheming because, he made Job's life a living hell, pretty much. And then as the story goes, unfortunately for Job, all hell literally breaks loose. And calamity after calamity just hit this man, and all in order for Satan to be proven wrong, that Job's faith wouldn't stand the test of time when it came to stripping away his material possessions and all the things in this world that he loved. And so it goes on in Job chapter 1, verse 14. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing, and the asses, the donkeys, were feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I am the only one that escaped. And there's just this pattern. It keeps, and when he was yet speaking, this one fellow that came up to Job, there came also another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven, and has burned up your sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I am the only one that escaped alone to tell you. So all these people were running up to Job saying, oh, these things just happened, it's horrible. And another one, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away. Yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword. And again, I was the only one that escaped alone to tell you. There came also another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the men, and they are dead. And I am the only one that escaped alone to tell you. So wow. Calamity after calamity. And it says, Job arose and rent his mantle. I think that's kind of like the Pharisees would do, that tore their shirt. It's like a sign of grief. I think that's what that means. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it means. And he shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. First thing he does when all these disasters hit him, is he fell down and worshipped. That right there should have been a pretty good indicator for the onlooker, Satan there, of this man's character. And then Job said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then it said, of course, in all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Interesting, right? He didn't blame God for all the disasters and all the grief that he was going through. His lost loved ones, even his own family. Freak disasters, right? You always wonder about, like, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, and forest fires, which we have a lot up here. And just how people, I wonder anyway, how people perceive, say, the loss of a loved one by an act of God, as they falsely attribute it to, but an act of nature, suffering under the effects of sin for so many years is a better perspective in my book. But yeah, killed from some freak event. How do you make sense of that, right? And some people have had really bad luck. I mean, wow. Wrong place at the wrong time. And, how do you make sense of that? Do you blame God? Or do you keep your faith in God and trust that, God's ways are just, and ultimately, if these people were innocent and they were killed, God will raise them back up, and they will live again in the resurrection and the judgment and the eternity that follows. So, I wanted to bring up a couple more verses here, because even at one point, after all these calamities, after he faces all this, these horrible turn of events in his life, in chapter 2, again, Lord speaking to Satan, he again says, look at, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a perfect and upright man, one that fears God and escheweth evil, or abstains from evil, you could say. He holds his integrity, although thou moves me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man has will he give for his life. So basically, save his own skin, when someone's life is threatened, they'll, easily give up anything in order to preserve their own life. And so Satan goes on, but put forth your hand now and touch his bone and flesh. So previously, the deal was, I guess, between God and Satan, do not touch Job. Now Satan is saying, pushing it one little step further and saying, you know what, if his life is at risk, he will, blaspheme and blame God and curse God, basically, for basically wrecking his health, which is pretty tough, right? If you're that's one of the things, when you're facing a health crisis, like all else pretty much pales in comparison, right? All your other concerns kind of fade as you consider your own mortality. So, Satan says, touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. Strong words. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. So he says, all right, go after his health, weaken him, destroy him physically, but do not go so far as to kill him. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Wow. No fun. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal. And he sat down among the ashes. Poor old miserable Job. He just was covered with boils all over his body, and he had to scrape them off with a shard of pottery. And he's sitting in a pile of ashes, which is interesting, actually, if it was a type of natural remedy, because charcoal can work wonders for leaching out toxins from the body, applied topically or even taken internally in water. If you ever run into food poisoning or some other thing similar, if you've ingested something that doesn't settle too well, try a little small scoop of charcoal and some water, make a little slurry, and drink it down. It's good for you. do it all the time. And then he said, Ben said his wife, so this is the real, when you're down and their closest loved ones just hit you when you're down. That's pretty tough. His own wife came to him. Do you still retain your integrity? Curse God and die. It's basically saying, you're a miserable wretch. And, if you want to hold on to any of your own integrity, then just curse God and die. I mean, that's an inspirational pep talk if I ever did hear one, Wow. And so he says to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. What, shall we receive good at the hand of God and not receive evil? In all this, Job did not with his lips sin with his lips. So he never sinned with his lips. Interesting. That's hard to do sometimes, if you haven't noticed. I mean, real easy to say the wrong thing and harm someone else, or say something untruthful to God or about God. And then even his friends, Job's 3 friends, heard of all this evil that had come upon him. Eliphaz, Temanite, Bildad, Shuhite, Zophar, and Naamathite. Those are some interesting names. And they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and comfort him. And they lifted up their eyes from afar off and knew him not. They lifted up their voice and wept. And they went everyone his mantle, or rent everyone his mantle. So again, they're taking their clothing and ripping it out of just grief, basically. And sprinkled dust on their foreheads toward heaven. And so, yeah, even his own friends, they didn't even recognize him. I think he was so covered in boils, and it's probably grotesque even to look at. And so God took Job through all this suffering. And here in chapter 13, I just like this verse. I stumbled on it. Chapter 13:4. But you are forgers of lies. You are all physicians of no value. I can relate to that one, but in a modern context. But it says in 13:15, this is a question I have. Could all of us say something like this, going through what Job has just gone through? Though he slay me, he being God, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him, but I will maintain my own ways before him. He shall be my salvation, for a hypocrite shall not come before him. So he was still preaching, this guy. Hear diligently my speech and my declaration with your ears. Behold now, I have ordered my cause. I know that I shall be justified. And he talks about giving up to ghosts. He got to a point where he basically longed for death. That's how much suffering his life had become. So yeah, Job's concept of God was greater than his suffering. And thinking of the greatness of God helped him deal with the bad hand that he was dealt in life, you could say. And the book ends on a happy note. Job chapter 42, verse 16. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of days. So it does have a little bit of a happy ending, doesn't it? And God is good, right? And yeah, if you're wondering, people lived a little longer back in biblical times. So my question is, we're facing some challenges right now, and in comparison to what Job went through, our little what was it they were saying on the news? You know, we need to make the lives of the unvaccinated hell, basically. Make their lives miserable. But, you know, what we've gone through so far, and you know, I might be not the typical example out there as I work from home here. And I know a lot of you out there have lost jobs, had family members that wouldn't even see you unless you were vaccinated. But in comparison, you know, what we've gone through and what Job went through, you know, pretty small scale, pretty minor in comparison. My question is, do we have the faith in order to get through the trials ahead of us? Things are going to get tough. Things are just going to get worse and worse, especially for the faithful. You know, the devil is wroth, angry with the woman. And right now you're seeing this line being drawn. And more so, I think the devil wants to single out the faithful of God and make their lives hell. Make things really difficult on them to try to get them to compromise. And we're going to need a faith that only God can sustain in order to get through what's ahead. He is the author of our salvation, the author of our faith. Naked we are born into this world, and naked we will leave. And if that's our mindset, then, you know, Satan can do nothing to us. And these satanically inspired men and women in power can do nothing to us. And we will remain we will stand strong against whatever they throw at us. On principle, on faith, we will stand for what's right. We will stand for what's true. We will stand for God. And we will not compromise. Thanks everybody for watching. This is Nightwatch N8. God bless. Signing out.